Hello, welcome to the NETMOD Working Group. I'm Lou Berger. Kent Watson is here. James is not online, but he was very instrumental in preparing for the session, so we appreciate his help. We are at the IETF. I think everyone is familiar with it. We're midweek, but we still have our note well. If you are not familiar with it, please go to the URL at the bottom of the page and become familiar with it. Everything you do here is a contribution to the IETF and becomes part of our permanent record. Interesting. We lost our slides for a moment.
No, we lost our video projection. The slides were up behind you.
Okay. In addition to rules on participation, we also have a code of conduct. Please be professional in all our interactions. And if you have something that you think you were not treated well, we do have a process for that. And there are people who can handle your complaints. But we look forward to very professional conduct in this working group, and that is both in the room, virtually, and on list. We're midweek. I expect most of you know how to participate in the meeting. If you're online, you figured out how to get here. We generally don't use our microphones if we're remote, except if we're talking. And please don't ask to share slides unless the chairs ask you to do so. For those in the room, it's very important you scan in. We will have polls in this meeting. And you participate through either the full application on your laptop or the on-site tool on your phone. It's helpful for us also to get the right room size. We must have had many people register because we have a big room and not very full, at least here in person, but that notwithstanding, please do register so you can participate in any polls we conduct. We are using queue control. So if you go to the mic, we really ask you to register with the on-site tool or from your laptop. We wanted to be fair to those who are remote and treat them equally in terms of coming to the mic. I have not yet dropped in the link in chat, but Kent did it for us. Please join us for joint minute taking or note taking. It's really helpful to capture other people's comments and also go check that your comments were appropriately captured. You know where we are, so we can skip this one. This is a little bit of an eye chart. This shows us gives us status of all of our working group documents. We have syslog in the RFC editor queue. I saw, Joe, I think you responded to auth 48. Thank you. I think this document has been out a really long time. I don't know if it takes the record. I mean, I think 10 years is the record. It may be that old.
It definitely takes the record because it was explicitly kicked off to be a test case for how fast can we publish a document.
And we've done just the opposite. It's awesome. We do not wish to repeat that, but we are very appreciative to those who helped carry this over the line to get it published. We have 4 documents submitted for publication. This morning it was just 3. Thankfully to the authors of that last document to getting it ready for this meeting, and we got in that Shepherd write-up done and submitted. So Mahesh, you have more documents coming to you. You can see on here the status of each of the documents. We have one that has a revision needed, the 699 BIS. There's actually some open questions on it. We're going to be talking about it today. ACL extensions is close to done. It's on the telechat. Let's see, anything else interesting there? No. So post last call, we have a number of documents that have recently been revised and have been judged by the Shepherd to be ready to progress. The ones that here are marked revision needed are actually because of failures in validation on using the IETF validation tool. So if you go to the document page, it's going to give you warnings, not errors, but warnings. And there's basically in the process, there's a desire to have 0 warnings and 0 errors on any Yang model that we submit. So based on that process, I've asked the authors to say, go to fix their warnings. I don't know if any of those authors want to comment on the warnings and talk about their response, or I can do it for them if they prefer. So the process says submit without error or warnings. The validator is apparently an old version, and it gives warnings when it shouldn't. So we are going through a little bit of a process of validating that those are actually the cases, and we will document that in the Shepherd write-ups and move forward and look to our AD to help us to get with the tools team to fix this. Scott?
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 comments. One comment is the draft interface X Yang is -15, not -13. -15 or -13 is the other one, the one that has some of those errors that you were just talking about. So I don't know who cares about this, but when I upload and run the tooling by uploading the draft, I do get warnings in the draft. And when I take all of the Yang out of the draft, put it in my local system, run against the latest version of YangLint with the same options, I don't see the warnings. So I don't know if there's an older version of YangLint in there, or if I'm missing some options, because I would like to be able to replicate in my local environment so I can fix them before I upload the draft, right? But in this case, the errors that I'm seeing are warnings in a document that or a Yang model we're including. So we import a IEEE model that has some deprecated groupings, but doesn't propagate the deprecated all throughout the tree. And so it's complaining about a particular leaf that isn't deprecated, but it's inherited that it's deprecated because it's in a deprecated grouping. So that's going to be my rationale back to the Shepherd to say, I can't fix it. It's not in my draft anyway. So those are the 2 points I wanted to make.
I think we do have a little bit of a process problem that is beyond this working group. ID nits, when you go to submit, it actually says there are bad warnings here. We know it. We're fixing it.
Yeah.
My hope is we can get it either fixed by the tools team or the same caveat added to the process, so that we don't keep going over this. Now, the interesting thing is, we're NETMOD. We should understand this. This is direction to all of the IETF. So I'm trying to use this a little bit as a foil to try to push our process forward.
Right. And one last point I'll make is that I don't think it's necessary to send a liaison back to the IEEE since I go to the IEEE, but I can put into the maintenance process in the IEEE to fix this particular problem so the error will go away. But with the speed of the IEEE 802 process, it might be done in a couple years. So this is a process thing we need to fix here so that we aren't constantly talking about errors in other modules from other groups.
Okay. Well, I do think there's some things on our process, and I do appreciate the IEEE making the IETF look fast.
Scott, don't go away. Okay, Mahesh, speaking as an AD, I guess. The request to have this documented or fixed by the tools team comes at a good time, because I'm now a liaison between ISG and the tools team, so I will make it a point to bring it up. But to help me, Scott, if I can get his attention.
I don't know.
Scott, so what I need from you is what you tried, which is you got a YangLint version that gave the error, and then you ran it locally on your computer. But
So I can send
If
you
you
the
can
same
send
thing I
me-
sent, yeah. that
So
sent.
I have to say, we should take this offline.
We'll take it
Sure.
off.
I spent too long on this topic,
Okay.
so I have to speed up a little bit.
Just send me that.
Um, Is it on this topic, or is it a new topic? Balash?
Partly on this. I'm doubting that this whole inheritance of status warning is valid. Should it be there at all? So is this a documented principle anywhere that if the top level is deprecated, then you have to put deprecated statement in all its children? We inherit conflict also through all the way down. Why can't we inherit deprecated? I think this is the wrong idea to put this statement again and again and again and again.
Okay, thank you for the comment. We should discuss it on the list. I am just going to jump ahead and see if there's anything else that we should talk about here. Kent, is there anything you want to talk about on this list? All right. I'll speed up. We don't have any liaisons. And our agenda is slightly updated from what was published a week ago. We're going to have an update on 6991 post last call discussion. That's going to be an important one. And we've added at the end a discussion on errata. So that's another good one. And Kent has some other topics. If there's time on the open discussion, there should be. We know we should use the mailing list. We work remotely. And just as a reminder, we have a process where every working group document needs an update every meeting. The update can be an email, and the email should be sent at the time of the cutoff. The reason that it's at the time of the cutoff is that's when we do our scheduling. If you don't send an update, you'll probably find yourself on the agenda. Okay, ready for the next? I believe Mahesh, right?
Yep.
So I'm clearly not the author of the document, but since this document is an ISG eval, it is up to me and hopefully the shepherd that you'll tag team on this document to try to address some of the discussions that were brought up in ISG eval. So let's just go through them. So there were 2 members of the ISG that brought up a total of what I count as 3 discussions that need to be resolved. There are some others that I have already addressed, so we'll only discuss the remaining. There were some comments also provided, but since they are non-binding at this point, I don't want to take the work group time to try to resolve it. Okay, so let's discuss.
I'm sorry, can I just interject quickly? We have half an hour for this discussion to talk about these 3 topics, so lots of opportunity for discussion. It's really important that Mahesh can clear these discussions.
All right, thanks for that. So the first is from Eric, and I'm just going from easy to the hardest discuss. So this one is about the regex for the type def MAC address. He contended that that is incorrect because he was generally thinking of the overloaded term for MAC address. And in his mind, it can vary from 16 to 64 bits, especially if you were to include 802.15.4. As that uses more bits than 48. So that's the problem statement. I have a set of solutions I can propose and hope to have some discussion around it. So one is just fix the regex to accommodate 16 and 64-bit. But then there is also a type def of fizz address that actually allows you to do that. So this would be an overlap of sorts with the definition for fizz address. So that's one option. The other option is, of course, to clarify, and I think that's a simpler option, is just clarify that the MAC address as it was intended to be defined in this document is specifically for IEEE 802.3 and 802.11. All we say in the description or reference is say IEEE 802 with no qualifiers. Discussion.
This was if I remember correctly, this is actually an inherited definition from SMI v2, right?
More likely.
And I actually haven't checked what the SMI v2 definition is. I was trying to scramble to get there.
Okay.
But since it's inherited, I think we should look also back to what the original definition was and maybe scope it to that. Have you happened to
No,
have done
I
that?
did not look at it.
Okay.
But I'm sure even if it was not qualified in SMI, it was probably predating 802.15, in which case what it said at that time made sense, whereas now it leads to a little bit of confusion.
It actually says 802.1a. Scott, do you happen to know what 802.1a is?
.802.1a is ancient.
Right. This it's ancient. I like that.
A means ancient.
It also references 802.5. Something else.
802.5 is old. Was that token ring or something? I don't remember. It's an old thing. So MAC address is a very interesting thing to talk about for several reasons. One, the way that it's defined in Yang is, in my opinion, broken because it's a string and it doesn't really give you the flexibility to do the things that you need to do like this, like we had in SNMP, believe it or not. And there's also the formatting issue, but let's not even go there right at this particular point. So if there is a new version of 802 that is coming out that will have it won't have a new definition of MAC, but it'll be a better reference to point to. So if you want that, I can send you an email.
And is that definition going to be a 48-bit address, or is that accommodating 16, 64, and all the
I
other
think
bits?
it's going to continue to be what it's always been. So, I mean, I can take a look and see what it says, right?
Okay.
Does that mean it's going to remain a string?
Well, no, the string thing is a Yang thing. So,
I'm sorry. I thought you said there's a new string, a new Yang definition.
No,
Did I misunderstand? Oh, it's just a new definition.
Right.
Okay. I took it as a new Yang definition.
yeah, no.
So-
A new standard that is rolling up all the old things to provide a better reference. If you want to know what a MAC address means, you can point to a new document. The definition of MAC address in that document, I don't think is changing. But then what this is talking about is not just what's in the document, it's also the Yang representations associated with this are hard to use the way they are, but I don't want to complicate it.
Before you leave, I have a question for you. Is there a good IEEE definition that we should be leveraging?
Yeah, that's what I just said. There's a new document
I'm
coming
sorry,
up that will have
Yang
it.
definition.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Yang. No, the Yang definition between this goes back several years as well. There is a MAC address in an IETF Yang module, and there is a MAC address definition in 802.1 Yang module. They're different. The patterns are different. So if you use both of those modules in one application, you can have a valid MAC address that one will work and the other one will not, because uppercase letters, lowercase letters, dashes versus colons, it's very complicated. Not helping.
Rob?
On Scott's point, I agree. It'd be lovely if we could use the IEEE definition. I think that would cause us a world of pain if we were to do that. In terms of models that are doing this, I think there's not a good solution there at this time. To address this particular question, I think that we just clarify that the MAC address is 6 bytes in terms of this definition, because that's what everyone expects in terms of where this MAC address is being used. Maybe we add another 16 to 64-bit MAC address type at the same time if you want to cover the wider ones, or could do that in the future. And then with a different name, and then I think that'll be fine. I don't quite know how PHY address is used versus MAC address. I was trying to look at the definition quickly. That seems to be an arbitrary number of bytes anyway. So but I don't know where that gets used, if there's any references to it or not, or it's just added and it's just been brought along from history. Maybe it's a token ring thing.
To me, this looks a bit like the IP address and the date, where we had the IP address with the zone because it accommodates everything, but no one wants that, or a date with the zone. Maybe we need to concentrate on the main use case.
Kent as a contributor. So this is a string type with a pattern statement. You were saying regex, but it's a pattern statement. And we've run into other issues where there's pattern statements that are too restrictive. And I'm thinking specifically about email address. Originally, I think you're going to try to model the email address very specifically, but there's so many variations. He ultimately wound up with just basically saying it's a some string followed by an @ symbol followed by some string. And it's as simple as that right now. The current pattern statement is saying that there's exactly 6 colon separated tuples, and maybe we just make it in number of tuples, colon separated tuples, and make it less restrictive, and that could be a way of doing it. Or like someone else was saying, we could come up with a union type, so we have like MAC address 12, MAC address 16, MAC address 64, and then create a union type around all those generic MAC addresses.
So I think that's going down to Bladger's point. That's going down the route of, because we've been told there's these other things exist, let's make the type generic so that our data models handle these other values that nobody wants to use in their data models. So when you look at OpenConfig, they had the same issue with IP addresses and zoned IP addresses. And the reality of it is that nobody uses zoned IP addresses anywhere in Yang, as far as I understand. It doesn't really make sense. If you need a zoned IP address, really, you just want to have an IP address and an interface reference or context in terms of where you place the IP address. OpenConfig, they just fixed it. They made the change, it was done, it took them no time, and they moved on. And we yet in IETF, when I tried to fix it or make suggestions, it was no, there's backwards compatibility issues, blah, 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 blah. And we get nowhere, and we end up with a model that is far less easy to use for 99% of the industry. And there might be some hypothetical 1% that's using this obscure definition, but in reality, there's no one. And so I'm opposed to sort of trying to change MAC address to be more generic and less useful. If we're going to have any constraints in Yang, this is one of the values that's fairly easy to constrain, I think. Otherwise it's going to allow 2-byte MAC addresses, and the device is going to be like, they're going to just reject it somewhere down the line.
All right, we have one more. Carsten?
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that the names we are providing in the Yang models are not the source of the meaning. So the fact that this thing is called MAC address doesn't mean it's a MAC address. It means that it's a MAC address as was defined in RFC 2547 or something. And we continue to use the name, but if we want to stay backwards compatible, we have to accept that those names are wrong. But that doesn't really matter because it's well defined. So everybody knows that MAC address is a 48-bit address.
Okay. Can we get a quick poll on this? Well, the poll is we don't change the definition.
Okay.
Maybe add some clarification.
Change the definition or the description?
Sorry. Yeah, do not change the type def.
Right.
Add more descriptive text or references
Yes.
to just address the issue.
Mhm.
Before you hit enter.
Yep.
Can you accept?
Okay.
Maybe it's actually worth having a general piece of text somewhere that explains that these names of the types are not meant to mean anything. It's just the names that were given a while ago, and they may no longer 100% correctly describe what the thing is.
Right. So what we're looking at is keeping the same regex, changing the description to say that it is not a general description of all MAC addresses, but this one particular case, which sort of has that historic meaning from SMIV2 and really just means our normal 6-octet MAC address. And we're really asking, can you live with this? Not, is this the best answer?
And Scott was just showing me the reference of the 802.3 document that it splits out EUI 48 and EUI 64. So we just reference EUI. This is EUI 48. That would also bind it.
Looks like it's settled down. It's not changing anymore. Oh, one more.
Well, to me, this is pretty conclusive. I mean, we don't have full participation of the physical and virtual room, but we do have full agreement of those who have participated in the way that we have no no's. It's mainly yeses and a couple of no opinions. So sounds like we can accept this and move on.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So Ori brought up two discuss points that I'd like to discuss here. On the type-def URI, in the description, it says somewhere, I'm not quoting the entire description. He says, well, what we say in the model is all unnecessary percent encoding is removed. And I know there's a little more context to that I'm looking to Kent to provide. But the question Ori asked in his discuss is what is unnecessary percent encoding?
Sure. So I looked into this. I had to actually ask generative AI to tell me what is unnecessary percent encoding. But so actually it's really wrong encoding or bad encoding, or it's the example that was given is double encoding. So you start off with a space character in your URL, and so that becomes a percent to 0, and then it gets URL encoded again and becomes percent to F to 0, which is wrong. So it's really just wrong, bad encoding. This particular sentence, which is in the middle of a paragraph, and it's exactly that, what's in quotes right there, all unnecessary percent encoding is removed, should just be deleted. It doesn't add any value to the document in my mind. Already it's expected that when you do percent encoding, you're gonna do it correctly. And so why do we need to say anything about it being done incorrectly?
So I don't know your eyes very well. Are you allowed to write the capital letter A as %65? Does that parse?
So I'm not an expert, so I don't know exact semantics, but I think let me go and jump to the next slide and talk about the possible solutions, and maybe it might answer your question. So Ori provided some suggested text, and this comes from 6531, and it says something about converting it to A label and removing all U labels in the conversion. Don't ask me, I am not an expert. So I'm literally, so we have, that's option number one. Of course, option number two is what Ken said, which is just remove that text.
So I guess my question is, are we trying to get a canonical URI, if such a thing exists? As in, are you allowed to percent encode every single character in the URI and it will actually be interpreted to just convert, if it's %65 back into a capital A? And is that unnecessary percent encoding? In which case you want to always use the simple letters where they exist, and you should only use percent encoding when you cannot use a simple letter in its alternative. I don't know. This is outside my area.
Yeah, if it's out of your area, it's out of my area too. So So those are the two options in front of us. And Ori, but frankly, he said, I'm fine with either one of them. He's okay if we just decide to remove the text.
So you said my only concern was if by removing the text, I don't think you probably don't want to remove that constraint. So I think maybe if that's what it's getting at, I think that might still need to be described. I don't know what those other, I can look at the text of those sections.
I mean, I kind of take that example as almost like a security thing where, I mean, it shouldn't have been percent encoded in the first place. Why would you percent encode an A to be, 65? Unless you were trying to hack, but if you were to take the original string with A actually being an A and feed it into a encoding library, it wouldn't spit out the percent 65. So this is someone doing something nefarious to get to that state. And I mean, it seems like almost like command line injection, where you like are trying to pass things in a hacky way and get them through.
I'm more thinking like if you're writing Unicode or something or anything in code, you're normally allowed to use the numerical value, the Unicode value for any symbol, even if you don't need it. And most things allow that, but it's not the canonical form. And hence, if you were to want to normalize, you would sort of simplify that. There's other Unicode normalization you would need to do. And so I don't know if it's like, if this is what that's getting at. So I don't see that as necessarily attack. It might just be some laziness that if you've got something to do it by machine, it might just be take all the bytes and just do it in a formulaic way. I don't know.
Okay, well, I think we have two choices. One is Ori's original request was to add some clarifying text to explain better what is unnecessary percent encoding. And so we could use the couple that we just spoke of. Or the other option was just to remove that sentence and not worry about it. So I think we could do a show of hand on those two.
I'd like to ask the Shepherd and the AD if they have a recommendation on which approach to follow.
My recommendation would be to remove the text based on my discussions with Ori.
Okay, so if it's okay with the Shepherd, we'll pull that.
Okay.
I have it written.
Okay. Can you accept?
Yeah, while we do that, maybe we can follow the cue. So this is about syntax-based normalization of URIs. So the reference to 6531 is misleading because this is about DNS names, which is a completely different thing. So this is about the whole URI, and 3986 defines a process called syntax-based normalization, which essentially takes away unnecessary percent encoding and does a few more things like taking away unnecessary dots and things like that. Yeah, I have no opinion on whether this is actually needed, but it sure is well defined.
Yeah, my personal view is if it's valid, then it's valid. And I don't really, it's unimportant whether you have a naive implementation that unnecessarily encodes by some definition, as long as it's valid. And this doesn't get at that. This is not about validation. This is still an assumption of validation. This is only about worrying about if, I mean, whether it's nefarious or naive, it's unnecessary. It still has to be valid. So that's why, for me, I'm fine with removing the text personally.
But there's other examples in that file where it suggests normalization of various types. I can't think of the exact examples. IPv6 addresses is probably one of them, where that's really useful because if it's used as a key at all, then you make sure that you've got the key with two different values. You try to compare them. If they haven't been normalized, it doesn't work. I don't know if there's a normalization consideration here, but if there might be, then my fear is we're removing some text that, I wouldn't say keep the text. I think it needs to be expanded. But so if there's no normalization concern, I'm happy for it to go. If there is a normalization concern, I think we should still have the text that says it needs to be normalized.
Okay, so you're one of the few people that are saying no
Yes.
to removing this.
Okay.
That I'm one. Yeah. Yes. No. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to, and again, I'm going to look to the Shepherd and AD. I think it's reasonable to say that the sense of the room is it's acceptable, but that we should evaluate if anyone in the near term has some proposed alternate language. Rob, you're listening? So if someone has some specific language for us to consider, we can bring it to the list and evaluate it. But I am saying that right now the temperature of the room is it's okay to remove the text. So if we hear nothing on the list, I think that's the way we should go.
Thank you. You? All right.
I see Rob coming in. He's not in queue, but
I need time for the last one. No, go ahead.
So are we going to remove, if you remove that text, are we going to also remove the text that says all case insensitive characters are set to the lowercase?
I didn't hear what you said.
So
That would keep
why?
for the canonical format.
Yeah, so you're going to take out the bit about canonicalizing the character in a different way, but keep the one about doing it in lowercase. Doesn't make sense to me. It's inconsistent.
Okay, I really, because this is probably the most contentious of all the discusses. So this one is all about the compatibility of date and time. So I'm going to probably gloss over a lot of the discussion that happened on the mailing list. So if you want, you can go to the NETMOD mailing list and just search for 6991 biz. Some background information. So currently the time offsets minus 00:00 essentially indicates that date and time value is reported in UTC and that the local time zone reference point is unknown. Now, the later RFCs have updated to kind of deprecate the use of minus 00:00, and in fact, they suggest that plus 00:00 and Z both indicate that the date and time value is reported in UTC and that the local time reference point is UTC. And so that's a little bit of background. So I think the thing we need to debate is the three options that I put up there. One is do nothing, and simply note the fact that the canonical format used by this particular Yang module predates the guidance in RFC 9557. And the ORI is fine with that. The second option is we break backward compatibility and replace minus 00:00 with Z. That, of course, has its own issues. We are breaking backward compatibility, and date and time is probably fairly well used within the community. The final, which is also at least my recommendation, I don't know about Kent, is to keep the existing definition as is, but deprecate it. And I think Jürgen himself agrees that possibly this is a good candidate to be deprecated. And optionally, he suggested that a new draft be used to define date and time, date, time, and variations of all of them with zone, no zone. Sir, open for comments before we, I guess we go to poll.
So there's three options here, which we can't really do a show of hands on three options, but you said you prefer option 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can ask, the option could be, can you accept option 3?
I have a question as contributor clarification.
Hmm?
Yeah.
So if we follow 3 and deprecate it, what do we replace it with now?
In the current draft, nothing. We're not, that's what, there's no requirement that it has to be replaced in the same draft.
Right, but generally the practice is if we decide we're going to deprecate something, we leave it as is, and
Right.
then do a new document
Mhm.
that is an update to this document, and we'll
Yes.
deprecate it then.
That's good.
So that would be like the normal process. But if you're saying it's just so bad, we're going to deprecate it, but we're stuck with it, so then we continue to use it. It seems a little confusing to
Okay,
me, and I'm speaking as contributor.
right.
As a contributor, I wouldn't know what to do with that.
Okay, I guess, at least I was taking the stand that if you deprecate it, you're not removing it. People can still continue to use it. And then hopefully in due time, we will have the new draft and we'll have the new definition. So
That seems to be confusing guidance. And it would be better to leave it there, and then when it's time to deprecate it, it gets deprecated.
Sure, that's certainly, okay, so if you
So
want to
I
modify the
don't
third.
understand the value of doing number 3, and I think it will just cause confusion.
Okay, so you're saying basically go back to,
I think it would be great to fix it now. But if we're not going to fix it now, then just deprecating something, just it confuses those writing Yang models.
okay, fair point. Any other comments?
We have Cart.
So there is a statement in the description that says this is a profile of ISO 8601, and that statement has not been true for 25 years. So you at least have to remove that statement, because if you decide to be backward compatible, which I could understand, then you would just say, well, this is just different from what the ISO standard says.
So, so I remember as an AD reviewing Carsten's document when he was updating the date time format. I don't remember the RFC number. Maybe it's that 9557. And we had a discussion. I raised, maybe discussed, or certainly some comments about the fact that he was making this non-backwards compatible change to that format and changing it to saying that Z is the canonical format. And Carsten's response, I remember correctly, was saying, we're really just updating it to reflect what the rest of the world does, and to make it, as in all like Linux servers and everything, and also to make it consistent with the OSI documentation. And so I think for me, the obvious thing to do here is just to do two. Let's just fix this and move on, because we can maybe add a comment that to the definition that you should still accept -00:00, as in still accept that format, but the canonical format is with a Z. Yes, some people need to tweak their servers a bit maybe, but I just think we should fix it, treat it as a bug and move on.
As a Cantus contributor, I agree that number 2 is the fix. Currently the pattern allows for both Z and the offset to be provided for over-the-wire communication. It's just the canonical format that we're referring to. But the Z is the right approach. Do we dare to break backwards compatibility now, though, for it?
Okay.
And that's what would make the polls so interesting. Would the working group vote to break backwards compatibility?
So I've made this comment earlier. So the open config folks, they have an approach of let's just break backwards compatibility and fix issues and move on. And they're getting a lot more adoption of their Yang models than we are here.
So, Shepard, AD, how would you like to poll? I know what poll I would run, but Shepard and AD.
I would,
Number 1. Okay.
Option 1.
Yeah. Are you doing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to poll for option 1.
Well, the option 1 will be, can you accept option 1? And if you click no, then it would be, presumably you're meaning option 2.
Well,
changing.
But that's okay. 2 or 3.
that should be no change, not no chance. The short hint there.
Breaking even.
All right, we're getting very little participation and pretty much an even split between the three, between yes, no, and no opinion. Although it's a little bit of a race. We'll see who pulls out ahead. I'm going to say that there's no consensus on option 1.
All right. Thank you.
Should we, now that we eliminate option 1, should we try?
I don't think we eliminated it. We don't have agreement.
I know, but we don't know if the no means because they prefer 2 or they prefer 3.
So it's going to be, can you accept option 2?
More informative.
So I want to make sure we're polling, we are understanding the poll. The poll is, can you live with it? It's not a preference. So I'd like to, I mean, personally, I'd like to understand why people who said no to 1 can't live with it. It's not preference, it's live with it.
It's a bug. It's good to fix bugs. It's a bug. It's good to fix bugs.
Okay. So option 2 is break backward compatibility.
Okay, this is more helpful. It's very interesting.
I think it's very interesting.
Okay, I think.
All right, so it looks like the temperature of the room is that it is acceptable to break backward compatibility in this case. All right,
Thank you.
Great.
so we'll take notes on that and we should move on because we now are running a little bit late. But thank you all for participating, helping close out this document. So Kent, you are up.
No.
Oh, no,
Rob.
Rob, you're up. Sorry. I skipped over Rob.
That's punishment. Gosh, that screen's small. So I'm going to give an update on the Yang packages draft. So I can't remember. Is it 10 minutes I have? So I'll be very quick. So I don't know if you've given me. I don't have control of the clicker yet. That's right.
That's my bad.
I can do it.
No, I got it. Okay, no, do it.
Yes. Okay. So just a reminder of like the overall solution space. We've got a total set of 6 drafts. I think I'm ignoring the requirements draft. I don't think we're planning to take that to RFC. The authors weren't, so we had a discussion about that. So the top 3 of them all in or past working group last call and moved on. And so the next of the 3 remaining drafts we're focusing on is Yang packages. And so that's what this update's on. A recap of the decisions we made when I presented this in IETF 121. Overall, we said we wanted to keep it simple and wanted no differentiation between API packages and implementation packages. Packages just define what's there, a bit like Yang library, no optionality, no extra flags for deviations. The model should support mounted schema needed for IETF packages. I'm not sure that came out, that conclusion from IETF 121, but that's what we're working with. And we don't include checksums. And so that was in the draft. We've spent a bit of time on this, but not a huge amount. And that's because we're focusing on the working group last call issues in those other drafts and fixing those. So we picked it up about a month ago, and we've made some minor updates to the draft. We removed replaces version in a couple of places. We decided that's not necessary. It's also implicit, so that's not required. And we've changed the definition of mounted packages to allow multiple packages to be in that location. So this is too small for me to see, but you can, I've highlighted the places where it removes 2 of the replaces versions, and I've pointed to the mounted package where it allows now a list of packages to be mounted rather than a single one. I think I cover these in a bit more detail. So this also came out of the idea of the fact that packages should be quite small and simple, and we should be trying to build them together additively, is the idea. And when it came to like the mounted packages, we had the observation that if you include a package that mounts 2 together, you want to be able to combine those and have a combined mounted package, which I do have a slide for. But the other question that's sort of come out of that is whether we're being too restrictive with this approach and whether we need to have the ability of removing packages. So that might be something that we look at going forward, rather than using deviations. So mounted schema, this was an example of where we merged two here. I'm not sure how well easily I can explain this diagram, but package A is your top package that's including packages B and C each mount package D and E at a given mount point. And this is saying that when you do that, what you'd get at that mount point in package A is logically both package D and E would collectively, the union of those two packages would exist at the mount point. Whereas previously it was suggesting that like one would replace the other, you'd only have a single mounted package. So we think that acting as a union is sort of the same as the way that you'd merge packages at the high level as well. The other thing that came up that was sort of quite interesting was about conflict resolution, and the draft when we're discussing it, and this applies both at the mount point and also at high level, is what to do when you include two packages and those packages then both include different versions of a module or different versions of a package, and what you do about that. And the draft currently says that any tooling should sort of detect that, and then you have to explicitly resolve it. So you have to explicitly list which of those packages you want or which of those module versions you want. We're also looking as to whether we could do any automatic resolution of these things, which is probably possible. It does get complex that when you start to say, I want to choose version 1 versus 2 of that package, then you also need to effectively potentially take away modules because of that. So if the later version of the package has removed modules, then they've disappeared. So there's some complexities there we need to work out and think through. Some more work there. So basically the plan for next steps is to write a simple package compiler. So we've decided that some of these problems are sort of complex enough that we want to actually have running code to test them out and sort of write some packages themselves and play with them and see how this works. So that's the next step, is to write a simple package compiler, write some definitions. I'll probably try and start a separate draft as a guide of what the IETF packages could look like. In terms of the design and life cycle. I don't want to do a document that actually explicitly defines what they are. It just gives guidance of, I'd expect there to be packages for routing protocols. You might have a separate package for each routing protocol. You might have a package that covers the minimal set and the maximal set, that sort of thing. So it's going to give guidance, and then we'll build some packages as well and play with them and see how that goes, as well as doing some vendor packages. So does anyone have any comments on that approach? I don't need a poll for this, but if anyone's got any comments, they can come to the mic line and either heckle me or give me supporting Go Rob sounds.
Thank you, Scott Mansfield Erickson. So one question, when you're doing this tooling, are you thinking that you would provide a place to put instance data to help test that the thing is working, or is that something that would be separate that we would try? So in other words, the reason I'm asking is that it might require some changes to YAML or something.
So my plan is to write a compiler that will, you put a small definition of what you want for the package and what its dependencies are in a build file. It will then generate effectively the package file as JSON.
Oh, okay.
So generate JSON file, and it'll code that using the file instance data format that Balazs and Benoit and maybe
Okay, so you're thinking of doing that anyway.
So it should then be validatable via whatever, I can't remember the standard tooling and things like that. So yes, that should work. And that might be my last slide. I think it is.
Two more in the queue.
Oh, hello.
Hi, it's Oscar Gonzalez from Telefónica. So I can also volunteer to, at least for the network service models, try to get and see if we can make a package out of them. And the question is, okay, once the test package is created, what do you expect to do with it? To put it in some RFC place, to put it in somewhere? What is expected to be done with that?
Yes, so to your first question on the service packages, yes, I've already started trying to define some of those because they're very, very simple. So yes, there'll be those ones I'll do, the network layer ones and the service ones. So in terms of what I want to try with them is understanding as those evolve, what they look like and the versioning side of things, and does that make sense? In terms of will they be published somewhere? In the short term, I don't know, maybe they'll be available somewhere. They'll be in the build file and anyone else can run that and generate them. I think that in terms of also doing a draft in terms of the IETF package lifecycle, there's one about how does the IETF evolve Yang modules more efficiently and more quickly, and that's tied into the same sort of discussion. How do we do in a more agile approach? I think both packages and Yang modules have the same sort of concerns and constraints there. So I think trying to progress a draft in that sense would also be useful, and I think that means that you then are publishing these interim artifacts somewhere, and then when they become more stable, then I would expect them to end up in IANA, the definitions. That's where I would envisage them going, but I imagine there's a lot more discussion to happen first before that gets finalized. Balázs.
Balázs Lengyel Eriksson. It would be about tooling or some checking. It would be very good if you could use a set of modules, let's say in the IETF library format, and check that against the package definition.
Yes, I mean, in terms of building the package definitions, one of the ways I was thinking about was to take a file directory that contains them, or maybe it has a list of the directories for the import only versus the other one. So yes, that seems like a sensible thing to do, yeah. Sorry, Kent.
Kent is a contributor. When I heard Scott Mansfield's question, I was actually thinking that he was asking about test vectors. Like, here's your input, a certain amount of packages or modules, and when they get compiled together, this should be the end result. And I was looking at the Yang patch document recently, and it has some examples, but the examples aren't enough to code against. If you look to the list of pagination documents, they actually have test vectors. They say, here's an actual instance data store, here's the query, this is the result. And it has, almost 20 of those kinds of things. Your answer was that there'd be a compiler, which is a nice reference and good contribution, but a little bit different. So did I understand your point, Scott?
Yes, you understood my point, and it's like, I just want to know how much work I'm going to have to do the things that I want to do to validate that the packages are doing what the packages are doing, right? So I accepted Rob's answer because that seems to be the way things are in a lot of places. But I just want to make sure that the tooling will work when I create my own instance data to create those that information. If there's extra stuff that we want to add to the draft, I'd be willing to talk to Rob and add that stuff into the draft if that's something that's interesting.
Yes, yes, it is of interest. In terms of your question about test vectors, I'm not sure I want to put them in the draft. It might be that there's a repository somewhere that contains them. It's a reference. There's a risk with that in terms of where it goes.
You were at your left side, right?
Yes.
Okay, hi.
You were asking for encouragement. Thank you for doing this work. I encourage you to go forward. Actually, be quite serious. And I think the experiment's going to be very interesting. So thank you. So we are now transitioning from chartered items to non-chartered items. We're running a few minutes late, but not terrible. We're going to try to steal a few minutes from each of the presenters to stay on track and still have some discussion time. That said, Kent, you are at the end with the open discussion items. Do you want to yield? Do you want to steal some time from there? Because it's actually stealing from yourself. Okay. So you're going to take your full time.
Yes. And actually, there's really no need for discussion about this. So, I mean, maybe people have questions, but this is more of a report as to where we're at. Okay, so I'm here to give you an update with regards to Yang templates and a little bit of history lesson. First off is last year in July, it was actually when we were at IETF 120, we received a liaison and the numbers on the screen, and immediately heavy discussion ensued on the list. So I was like in the meeting room responding to folks on this item. There was a request made for template implementation presentations for IETF 121 in Dublin. And 3 months later, we were in Dublin and we had a special session on templates. It was the 1 hour session, session 2. I did a kickoff as NMDA enthusiast, and I want everyone to understand I'm really, templates was documented in NMDA, as was the inactive, and these are things that can be done. But so for me, this is completing the NMDA solution, and that's why I'm so excited about it. Then there were presentations from Robert, Stefan, Rob, and Jan on their various template solutions, followed by some open discussion. And but the key outcomes was we did a couple polls. The working group consensus is that this is an important problem for the working group to solve. So that was number one. And also there was a decision to generate a list of requirements. 6 days later, GitHub issue tracker was created. The URLs on the screen, 21 requirements were collected over the course of 3 months. And then there was a decision to have virtual interims to review these collected requirements. And the general flow of these virtual interims was that each requirement had a show of hands. Do you accept or support, I think was the word we used. Do you support this requirement? There were 2 virtual interims, and each was 2 hours. The first attended by 16, the second by 12. Thank you everyone who joined those sessions. Very lively discussions. So after collecting the requirements, 3 months later, there was that first interim. This is February 17, just last month, right? And so there's 9 requirements that were discussed at that meeting. And I'm going to go over these one by one. On the left-hand column is the requirement number. So if you go to the GitHub issue tracker, that's the requirement number. So the first says, wherever, oh, and by the way, these titles were wordsmithed during the meeting. So the show of hands was on the title. Like the actual wording of the title is very specific and what was voted on. Wherever a template reference can occur, more than one template reference can occur. And they're applied. So this is just basically saying that a reference to a template, it could be a multiplicity of references to template. 2, oh, and that had strong support. 2, templates must be able to reference other templates, or this might be called hierarchical templates. And here we had a split opinion. And in the footnote at the bottom, we see that the split, we're unsure if the no's was because they were opposed to the idea, like vehemently opposed to the idea, or was it just because it's not the first focus for an MVP. 3, templates must work with any Yang model, including those that have been augmented or deviated or refined. And for this, there was strong support. 4, template syntax must be validated when defined, not only when used. And here there was split opinion. Again, we're not sure if it was no because they're opposed to the idea or they just wanted to defer it until later. 5, wherever a template reference can occur, it must be possible to delete nodes from the template. And this was mostly opposed. 6, local config overrides template config. And for this was strong support. 7, templates are persistent, like they're living templates. Modifications to them are automatically applied to all the consumers of the template. And for this, there's strong support. 8, support basic programmatic elements in templates. So here I thought there was some looping type constructs, and actually I'm a little bit surprised it says strong support. Somehow I recall that wasn't so strong. I'll need to double check my notes on this one. 9, it must be possible to constrain which nodes can be template consumers. For that there was strong support. And then 10 days later, we had virtual interim 2, and we covered the remaining requirements. So 10, for living templates, the configuration with both expanded and unexpanded templates is able to be returned. And for this, there's strong support. 11, possibility to reorder some user ordered list or leaf list entries defined in templates. And for this, there's mostly opposed. 12, the running data store contains the unexpanded template, strong support. 13, for NMDA, the intended data store returns the expanded template. For this, there's strong support. 14, off-box template expansions of running containing templates must be possible, potentially enabling off-box validation. So for this, there's strong support. And by the way, this kind of leads into the general statement about clients needing to be NMDA aware, and especially we just talked about system configuration and them being able to resolve system nodes in order to do validation, off-box validation. So kind of part and parcel with that discussion. 16 was actually closed, that particular requirement. We decided that it was not needed, it was redundant. So then 17 for NMDA, the operational data store returns unexpanded template configuration. This depends on 15. And for this, it was mostly a post. I think I might have skipped 15, sorry. And for NMDA, the intended data store returns unexpanded templates, and that was also a post. So we want the intended to return the expanded or flattened templates, but whether or not they also return the unexpanded templates, which you'd find in running, was the question, and but mostly a post. That's both for 15 and 17. 18, support limited regex in template config for template consumer application. Strong support for this. And by the way, if the titles aren't making sense, click into the issue. There's the description statement provides more detail, and sometimes there's comments that even go further in the discussion. 19, when multiple templates are applied to a node, a precedence order must be defined, either ascending or descending. Strong support for that. 20, when templates are applied at multiple ancestor nodes, the innermost or closest template takes precedence. So that's, yeah, strong support for that. And then lastly, 21, the solution enables non-NMDA servers to return the expanded data. Strong support for that. And so at the end of the second interim, there's a little bit of a wrap up. We had some more time. And so the discussion was put, who would be interested in being authors? And 3 template enthusiasts volunteered. Sorted by first name, we had Deepak, Shifan, and Robert. And they are readying a draft for adoption. Already there's a draft that's been posted, but it needs to be updated. And that's why I didn't put a link to it. But thank you, authors, for already putting together a draft. And we look forward to this work progressing. As you may have noticed, we've been moving fast. It's just last July when this whole idea kicked off. And then, 3 months later, we had a major milestone and then another major milestone. It was a very, very quick clip. Hopefully we can keep that cadence going forward.
Yeah, on your slide about requirement 8, I'm not really sure, even I need to relook whether it was during the interim, whether there was some strong support on that, on requirement 8.
Sorry.
Requirement.
I'm not entirely sure whether that is, we were
Requirement
supporting
8.
this.
Oh, sorry. Okay, say again.
I'm not sure whether we were supporting this, requirement 8. We need to relook at the minutes.
Yes. Did you check the minutes? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, not yet, but I remember that we were, against this, not at least for the first draft.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so any other comments on this? Like I said, I didn't actually expect to take Q&A for this. Okay, thank you. That's our update, and hopefully we'll get another template update in Madrid. Or actually even better than that, on list before then.
Sorry, do you have other interims planned or?
It's not for this topic, no, but we could if there's a desire for it. We certainly could. The next one.
Okay, Deepak is next.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Kent, for the quick update. Yeah, before I start, I would like to put out a clarification on what this document is about. Just to clear the air, I'm sure there should be some confusions about this document talking about a template, and we have been having a lot of interims and discussions in the past couple of months, weeks on this. So this document is not an alternative to what was just presented by Kent. So it's more like information sharing on what was done in PBF, right? For the short term.
I held off.
So this is more of a implementation method. We're not inventing something new here, but it's a certain way of organizing the schema and reusing existing tools to achieve one particular scalability issue, which is very specific to the access part of the network. So this is more of a short-term implementation that was tried out in BBF, and is not an alternative to what we are trying to put out in the future within IETF. So what do we mean by that in BBF? What is the short-term method? It's basically, I'm sure many of us already know, but the topology of the access network, but I'm anyway just going to go ahead and explain it a bit. So we have the OLT, we have, which is hosting the server, the NetCom server, which is also hosting thousands of home devices, the ONUs in BBF's parlance, in the access network parlance. So those ONUs are also represented. The data of those ONUs, those home devices, are also represented using the same set of YANG models as that of the host device, in this case, the OLT. So it's typically, this method is suitable when the device contains multiple instances, which is basically represented or functionally, which is similar with limited variations. So this is definitely useful when the host device, the OLT, also manages a lot of peripheral devices. And most importantly, since it is more of an organizing data nodes in a certain way or designing the YANG in a certain way, so it depends on existing tools. And as an extension to what was presented in 121, this extension is just an example of what it would take for templatizing existing models. The example here taken here is the interfaces. That's just an example, yeah. So yeah, so typically what we have is instance is something which you can relate to the ONUs or the template consumer in IETF's interim language. So basically, this is a traditional way of configuration of ONU, where the same set of configuration needs to be replicated across thousands of devices. So this is done traditionally. Now this could be definitely inconvenient and definitely error prone, leading to long configuration time as well as memory footprint. So what does it do? It, of course, creates a typical instance, call it template, and then configure the list of instance with just a pointer towards the template. And now this is not something new as such. We have seen varied levels of implementation across different vendors. Even if you see the schema, if you see how it's organized, it is also part of the TS group. We have an RFC which is more or less similar to what is being proposed by BBF here. Now, because an instance may need certain variations from the template configuration, so this method should also allow it to override it, right, on a per instance basis with the values that will overrule the value that is coming from the template. So it's we were talking about the local config takes higher precedence in the requirements, right? So this is what it is, and it also should allow the data node to be customized. So the template YANG model and the instance schema must contain the same data nodes. This is to allow the customization and overriding requirement. So how does it look like? So we have the template, which is blueprint kind of a thing. And if you look at the instance or the template consumer or the ONU, so it has a reference to the template. And then it also has the same schema in order to allow overriding or customization. So how does grouping come into the picture? So if you were looking at the previous slide, we were talking about the same set of data nodes applicable across different ONUs as well as the template, right? So to allow any data node to be customized or overridden, the template part of the tree and the instance part of the tree must contain the same data nodes. So the easy way to do it is to club them together in a particular grouping. The same grouping can also be used to define data nodes inside the template and the instance. So when this is used for existing standard, in this case, we are talking about the IETF interfaces. So what we basically do is we cannot go and update the existing interfaces module as such unless we come up with a BIS or something, right? So what this is, what the method employed is to copy the existing nodes into a grouping into a new module, right? Which is then imported into applicable template model as well as the instance model to avoid duplication. So this draft explores the possibility of templatizing existing IETF interfaces by grouping the sample nodes and importing that into a new module. So a quick summary is, so this is mainly to share what is being tried out in BBF and maybe to get the working group's opinions or suggestions to check whether IETF at this point of time needs to be involved in creating the groupings, or we say, no, let's not do it within IETF and we'll just allow BBF to continue on its own track. I mean, allowing BBF to define its own groupings and copying it into a new module, or we say we will get involved in creating the groupings ourselves, since we're talking about existing IETF modules. And of course, finally, I should say that this proposal that BBF is trying to do is not going to cover the extensive list of requirements that we just saw. So it's just solving one part of the scalability problem and not the entire, it doesn't provide entire functionality that we discussed in the previous slide. Sure. That's all from me. Any questions?
Balázs Nagyel Eriksson, as similar patterns are already in use in many places, so providing some guidance, I think, would be valuable.
Yeah, great. So yeah, it's more of an implementation method or organizing data nodes in a certain fashion. Yes, Robert.
Rob Wilson, Cisco. So thank you for presenting this. So I think we've chatted already earlier in this week. I think we shouldn't publish anything for this particular area. I think it'd be better to focus purely on a generic templates solution to avoid sort of confusing the industry or in terms of the fact that we're working on two sort of different solutions. So I think for this one, we shouldn't do anything. We should focus on the generic template solution that you're also working on.
I'm sorry if I'm not able to get you correctly, but you don't want it to be called as a generic template mechanism because it is creating some confusion? Or?
I think NETMOD should work on a single draft for a single templating solution rather than having one that is sort of protocol based and one that is data model based.
Yeah, Kent as chair. Yeah, I took this as just sort of an update, informational draft, but the working group is not going to look to adopt this draft.
Okay.
Yeah, but at the same time, I would like to put out whether, I was just asking whether we need to get ourselves involved in creating the groupings, or we say, no, we're not going to do it and let BBF follow its own track. Do we want to do that?
We can do a show of hands on that maybe, but.
I don't understand what you mean by let BBF do its own. Can you repeat that last statement? Because we can't do anything to influence BBF here.
No, I'm saying should we define groupings, which is going to be, which might be useful for our long-term proposal, or we say, no, let's not get involved and let BBF to define the groupings on its own.
So what I heard from Rob, and I personally agree with as chair, that we should only be working on one solution document.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is part of that one solution document, that's great. If it's something separate from that, personally, I don't think we should be working on it.
Mm-hmm.
As chair, I don't think we should be working on it. But of course, the working group ultimately will decide.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see a value of doing a separate template component that's not part of our overall solution.
No, I agree. I agree. But do we have any concerns about, technically allowing BBF to do so, or how do we deal with that?
We can't allow them or stop them from doing what they want. We can certainly send a liaison.
Okay.
If you think it is worthwhile for us to send a liaison, generally we ask for proposed text to be sent to the list and to be discussed.
Okay.
So if you think we should be sending a liaison, give us some text that you want the group to say.
Maybe to answer to that, I think we already have a reference to the liaison that was already sent sometime.
I don't recall one on this topic with specifics.
There was an incoming liaison.
It was
Right,
an
I'm
incoming.
saying sending.
Oh, okay. So responding back. Okay.
Oh, no, not responding, sending a new one.
Well, it could be a response. If he wants to propose a response, that's okay.
But the one that we got wasn't from BBF. He wants to send something to BBF.
Okay.
Different organization.
Okay.
But I mean, your question was, do we have a concern? I think the answer is no, we don't. It's a different SDO.
We have some people.
Okay, the BBF liaison officer, Xuan Song from ZTE. So first, I'd like to express my appreciation for the efforts of the NETMOD working group on the progress for this work, to address the scalable young definition to support the large scale network elements management. Okay, so a big effort on the progress of this of this work. And for the BBF questions, actually it has been included in the BBF liaison. It has been sent. It seems like the liaison 666. So I agree with Lou. And if there's other questions or concerns from Nokia or from other company, I think it doesn't stand for the BBF's intention or BBF's consideration. Okay, thank you.
Robert, you're next in queue.
Yes, Robert Pesci speaking, Robert from Nokia. I'm co-author with Deepak and Shia of the draft that Deepak has just presented. I just want to repeat what Deepak already said. So this is just, the draft is just a document that provides you for your information what we are willing to do in BBF for a particular application. So this template solution, as we said already, is a temporary, let's say a short-term solution. And we do not want to compete with the ultimate standards that IETF is working on. So it's just to bring you, look guys, this is what we can do with the current tools and the current young language in order to improve the scalability. If there are ideas in this draft that can be taken over in the ultimate draft, in the ultimate standard from IETF, okay, fine, that's the better. But again, it's just for information that we bring you this knowledge. And just to clarify that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And last in queue, Shia? Shia Ashraf? Maybe not.
Okay, well,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. We've invited Ayanna to participate in one of our discussion topics. They were up to, that topic was slated to go not next, but after that. But so we're going to swap orders because we have Ayanna in the room and we appreciate you coming. And Balazs, you're up. So that means, Brian, you're going to be delayed probably 10 minutes or so.
Hello. So this was an old problem that I would like to address somehow or get addressed somehow. We know that we make mistakes in our RFCs, including our models. And we realize that these problems, we have the errata to document them, but the Yang modules are not updated with these errors. And the alternative is IETF either publishes an updated Yang module, or would the vendors and users do it themselves, maybe in a different way, maybe with small errors. Not good. So what to do? We could create a new RFC and go through the full process, but that's very long and people don't take the time, and so not happening really. The alternative would be to publish just the updated Yang module, not the full RFC, just the updated Yang module in the I and the Yang parameters registry. That already contains our modules, and in one case, actually an errata was already added to these modules. We don't have a clear process for it, which IANA would really like. And there's an interesting question that in this web page in the parameters registry, shall we show only the latest updated, corrected module, or shall we show all the previous ones as well? So IETF alarms is corrected or was corrected once. So we need some ideas how to do this. First of all, only verified erratas are in scope which update the module itself. Who could do the updates? I think IANA is not a Yang expert, but this task is simple text replacement and adding one revision statement. So yeah, we could do this. Or I hope they could do this. Who could approve this? Proposals, there were proposals that any Yang doctor that IANA asks could approve it, or maybe the AD or work group chair based on the Yang doctor's recommendation. And yeah, we need to announce that. And then we need to document somehow this process. IANA would prefer an RFC, which seems to be by a little overkill, maybe a wiki page. I don't know. I'm looking for guidance on this. I'm even willing to work on the RFC if that's that's selected. Okay, so what based on earlier discussions and my ideas as well, so what could IANA do? Let's say the work group chair finds that there is a verified such errata. He or she starts the process. Yeah, we have to apply the text edits, change the name, and add the new revision statement, which we have a template for, so it should be really simple. I hope that IANA could use the Piang and the Yanglin tools already provided in the tool set to validate this, and then the Yang doctors could approve it officially. Yeah. Question now or.
Sorry. Am I speaking as a contributor? I definitely realize that there is, as part of trying to make updates to Yang models, this is easy or easier, I would say, step, and we should definitely think about how to do it. I just wanted to get some clarification. So if you could go back 2 slides. Right.
This one?
Okay, let's start with this one. So the first bullet item talks about verified errata. Now, even with verified errata, there are 2 choices. There's technical, I think it's technical, and there is waiting for document update. So is the ask that it be applied to both of them, or is it only for what is technical?
Can I jump in here? I actually spoke with our RFC editor yesterday on this, and there's an idea of adding a 3rd button now.
Okay.
So there's verified, but verified with WG consensus would be an extra button.
Okay.
And for that one, It's not just the AD deciding, like based on a few results. It's more like it goes through the gamut of WG consensus, like a poll of some sort.
Okay.
And then, so there's another option. But I think it's not for the case of hold for document update.
Right. And so related to that, I guess the requirement that there be a link to the work group consensus, right? Somewhere which calls out, this is what the consensus call was, when the call was made and what the agreed result was.
And to be clear, working group consensus would be owned by chairs, not
Yes.
AD and not by anyone
Correct.
else.
That's right. And the point that RFC editor made was that sometimes errata need to be verified for documents for which the working group is no longer around, no longer exists. So there needs to be a way to verify errata without WG consensus.
Right.
And, but, so that was the distinction that was being made.
Clarification, what you've just said. I was assuming that verify with working group consensus is the only way you would get the module updated.
Mhm. Yes.
What happens in that case where the working group is no longer?
You could use the ops area work group.
Say again?
Okay, you could use the ops area work group as a catch-all.
Maybe.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
possible.
you might want to say that it belongs to the AD of that area to make the call. If you may remember that we say we want the working group that is most knowledgeable about the material or that the Yang model covers to own that. So for example, routing protocols should be owned in the routing area, not the ops area.
Okay. One comment to the previous one. I think in the errata already today, we have sometimes statements that to be corrected in the next release of the RFC.
That's the waiting for document
So
update.
if the change is major, technical, then yes, that's the correct way to indicate that, no, this is not an error capture, not verified, but only for the next RFC version.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I was a little hesitant about this process was exactly where do you draw the boundary between something that is enough to be handled in an errata, or should that be deferred for a document update? But Ken seems to suggest that the third button somehow is the way to solve this.
Right. So as chair, I know that you have upcoming slides that are like regarding the process, or we could discuss a process, but I don't think we should discuss that in detail right now. You have here, should it be an RFC or a wiki? There's a request for it to be an RFC. So I definitely think we should be publishing an RFC. What we're talking about right now, this extra button, Mahesh and Rob before you, and maybe even Benoit before that, all had expressed concerns about verifying technical errata, right? Because you're effectively breaking compatibility. So we're trying to find a way to allow you to verify a technical errata. And so the thinking being is that if you can get WG consensus, then the working group has signed off that this is truly a bug. No one would have implemented it correctly. It has to get fixed. It makes no sense to keep the old. So we're trying to find a way to make it possible to verify those technical errata and not hold them for document update. As soon as you verify it, then the process works. IANA already has the mechanisms to auto republish the revision of the Yang module. And by the way, the old Yang module is still available, even though it doesn't show up on the page. If you just go to the URL and replace the revision date with the old module, it's still there. It's still on the server. It's just not linked on this.
I would say that when you pull the entire folder down, you get all the revisions of all the Yang models.
Okay.
Let's do some more Q.
So,
Let's do more of the queue.
Benoit, can you please go back to the previous slide? That was a good one. So who approves the model? I would say the AD based on the community feedback, which could be Yang doctors, which could be the working group. Which could
Speak
be,
a little louder.
Oh, sorry. Who approves the model? I believe the AD based on the community feedback. It could be the Yang doctors, it could be the working group, it could be the other area, whoever. Where to document the process? Maybe I mentioned one or twice, I'm not a process guy, and I'm thinking, why don't we just trust the AD? Because the AD is going to anyway ask the right person, the doctors, the working groups. So I'm always a bit scary whenever we say we'll have a process for this, an RFC, and that becomes the rules. I'm thinking there is common sense. We know it's a bug. If we have agreement amongst the community, okay, AD says yes to IANA, published a new revision. So I'm wondering, in which cases do we need to have a process for the non-common sense one? So in that case, you would not have consensus in the working group, then that's it. So is there really a need to get an RFC to get this done?
No,
Are you saying do we need an RFC for the process, or do we need an RFC to update the modules?
The RFC for the process.
So I strongly believe we do, because we have had this sort of informal thing and it gets lost and people don't know where it is. They don't know where it's documented. The only way we have good agreement and documentation on process is to follow our publication process. There is no other established way that has not been shown to get lost over time. So if you want to do this, if we want to make this as a process, and personally I think we should, I think we need an RFC, and that doesn't mean it has to be a long process. We can run it, the RFC, quickly. I think we're going to end up with agreement. But if we are giving guidance to the whole IETF on how to update RFC Yang models, we have to have an RFC that guides that process. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, let's agree to disagree. That's fine.
We've had things that happened during your tenure, which was agreed to, that got lost after that. And if you're not in the room, we don't know about those things. That's not the way the whole organization can work.
In which case you've got 2 revisions in IANA. So be it.
Rob Wilson, Cisco. So I definitely agree with Benoit in terms of, I think it should be AD that makes the approval in the same way at the moment, unless the general errata process changes, because it's the AD that approves any errata. So I think they would still be the ultimate person that rubber stamps it. And I agree that the AD should take on input from the working group or from the Yang docs as appropriate. I think this idea is fine. I think this is good. Yes, and Ken, originally I'd standing up to say that at the moment I was always using whole document update in the sense that you were not allowed to have two versions of a Yang module with different content and the same revision date effectively. So that was why I always had, you had to have whole document update, you had to republish. If the process was different when Benoit was there, I wasn't aware of it, but I don't know if that's something that's changed. So I don't know if that's something that was previously changed and changed when I was an AD, and hence that means we need an RFC so it doesn't get lost. I'm not sure. Do whatever's easiest.
you're next in queue. Did you want to say something?
Anyone else in the queue?
I think I covered the point.
I'm going to take you out of queue then. Okay, our queue is draining quickly. And I don't know if Aina wanted to say anything, but go ahead and step to the mic if you do. But to Rob, your point, it's always, we're not taking away the AD doing the approval. It's definitely the AD has the button. The chairs won't have that button. We're just trying to find what are the levers that, what is the mechanism the AD can have at its disposal to get to the conclusion that this is something that has got consensus behind it.
Okay, then that's a slightly different question. So if you're trying to distribute the work to actually get it approved effectively to figure out the change and you distribute that to the working groups, that's fine with me, that's good. Anything that takes the work off the ADs having to manage it, that's a plus thing. And then the AD finally says, yes, obviously they've done that, I'm gonna tick and approve, fine, that works.
Mm-hmm.
So the process you're envisioning is the working group approved wouldn't do anything until the AD approves it after, which is, I think, consistent with our general process.
Sure.
Any further comments?
No, that's it. But yeah, I mean, okay. I'll just generally make the concluding comment that right now, most of our errata are being held for document update. And all of them that are technical. And the idea is to flip that, to try to get the ones that are technical to be also verified. And I know we're limiting this discussion to Yang modules at the moment, but I'd like to expand that discussion to being also for technical updates that are outside of Yang modules. It is already the case that verified errata, that, not just Yang modules, but for any text, you can go to the IRC editor notes page, click on it. Yep, perfect. Yep, on that slide, way down the lower right-hand corner, but on other pages, it's in different locations. You click on that button. Unfortunately, I don't think, do you have another slide with what it shows when you, after you?
We still have a few people sitting in queue for a while, so should we get to them?
Yeah, well, anyway, it allows you to see the diffs right there with the errata applied. So it's not just for Yang modules.
Yeah, I put myself in sorry, Mahesh, I put myself preemptively in the queue really to get to the tools question. And because that's equally important to help the IANA editors are we going to give them a complete file and what is the process for the complete Yang module that they need to upload? Because I don't want them to have to go through all the edits because they don't have the ability to then validate the model. So the expectation is that when we do agree there is a Yang module with all the updates and validation done, that is then sent to IANA to just take it as is and publish it.
So you say that even these kind of trivial modifications should be done by the work group or someone, not IANA?
Okay, that's where I would like the discussion to go, is to, again, to the point that it is technical and it is verified what qualifies for this process, the new process that we are trying to describe, and what would be the case where we continue to use the current process. So I don't have an answer to that question, except I'm looking to the work group to try to define that.
As I understand, the work group and the AD will decide if this is really error correction editorial or really a big functional change. That's outside of IANA. But afterwards, what you see here is kind of a trivial update. Can we trust IANA to do this, or shall we give them a full file?
So we have two more in queue.
Yep.
Dejan Bogdanovic, if the description in the document, the text, is not changing in the RFC, and there is some change in the Yang implementation, having a review by the Yang doctors who will be doing the review and saying the text is still matching the Yang code, that, in my opinion, should be, enough to approve the change with, the AD just verifying that what the Yang doctor stated, hey, this is just a change in implementation. The text description is still saying the same. It is working, it is correct. We agree with the proposal. I think that would be the fastest and the easiest way to go forward. Because sometimes we get bogged down forever to decide on something.
Just like I just talked to the IANA editors, I think their preferences that would be to get a complete file in all cases. That would be the preference. If we do want to try to get them to edit the model, then they don't have the ability to validate it.
So Rob Wilson, Cisco, I just wanted to comment back on the point that you made, Kent. So I see this as a special process for Yang models, and I'm fine with that. That's great. I think you made a suggestion you would like to see this done more widely for documents more generally. I don't think we should do that just for this working group, and I think that's got to be an ISG decision or something to do. So it's much broader, affects the whole IETF, has to be done consistently, which is maybe what you meant anyway.
Yeah, you're right. Not this working group, for the other part, but I think IETF should consider it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right.
I
think we're done.
Okay, let's talk about it.
No, you can say final.
Yeah.
I'm actually ready to work on this, but
Nice.
I would need some support from,
Yeah.
and if there's any good example of, let's say, process RFCs to base on.
Co-author with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, so we look forward to seeing an update or a draft for this. And do you want people to contact you if they're interested in collaborating?
Yes, and
This will be a good piece of work. Thank you.
I'm a piece of work.
And maybe we can use this one as a test case for how fast we can publish a RFC.
Don't say that. That kills it. Don't say that.
Oh, you brought it up. Perfect. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So now we have 20 minutes.
Okay, so this is going to be the last last presentation, and he has, Brian, you have 15 minutes until the end of the slot.
All right, thank you, chairs, and thank you, working group, for giving me an opportunity to give some background and some cross-working group education. I'm going to be talking about the delay tolerant network management architecture, and the point of this presentation is not to request any action from anybody in NETMOD working group. It's, again, just education about what is existing and what is in progress and how it relates to things that are happening in NETMOD. So I'll be brief on the background and leave time for discussion, but the architecture itself is now defined in a released RFC 9675, and that document explains in some detail the contents, the rationale, the purpose of the architecture in comparison to other remote management approaches. But as a simple breakdown, conceptually, the management model that's contained there and described in more detail in another draft document is that there's a behavioral aspect to this remote management approach related to what are called managed objects with specific types that live on a remote agent. And there's a data model for values that are exchanged between entities in the architecture, specifically a manager and an agent, and within the agent, different processes that relate to these objects. And these are just some very high-level pictures of how these entities relate to each other in the architecture. But I'm not going to dwell on details right now. I'm going to move on to some more explanations. The DTNMA as a whole is spread across a few different documents, one a released RFC and the rest of them drafts in various stages of review and editing. But at this point, all of this behavior has been prototyped and exercised and is being updated to reflect the results of this kind of prototyping. The key takeaway here is that there is this overarching management model and a definition of what these data object types and value types contain. There is a concrete encoding for these value types called an ARI that has its own separate document and its own separate IANA registration. There is a protocol for exchanging these values through a transport to remote agents and managers. And then the second last item on this list relates to how the application data models are actually represented in a way that a human can access them and a tool can interpret them. And that's where this presentation really comes in, because I'm going to go into the next slide for some more detailed explanation. This is presented as an overview of explaining how these different piece parts fit together. There are links in the presentation PDF if you're interested in following these things out. But again, the point is that the ADM module encoding is one part of this larger ecosystem. Now, the ADMs themselves, the application data models, have a certain intrinsic structure to them. There's different types of objects. There's a fixed depth hierarchy of identifiers. All the objects have names. They have enumerations. The model itself operates under a specific organization, a specific unique name within the organization. I'm not going to get into too much detail of the particulars, but the idea is that each of these ADMs has a life cycle. It exists in a history of revisions. It has cross references to other modules and so on and so on. And the next picture is that when looking at the contents of these modules, we need an encoded form for them. We have to have a standardized mechanism of how do you represent these in a concrete way, again, that is both human friendly for editing and machine friendly for processing and manipulation. So originally, and you can look in the revision history of these documents to see how things have changed over time. Originally, the ADM encoding started as a JSON syntax document. The difficulty that we ran into was just that JSON is not made for humans to really manipulate. It's made for machines. It's missing a lot of syntactical elements that if anybody's edited these kind of files know that are really add a burden, unnecessary burden to managing these things over time. There's also currently not a well used standard for enforcing the structure of a JSON in the sense of having a canonical schema for these things. So those aspects make it difficult to scale and to manage life cycles of these things. So separately from that, as you all in this working group know, Yang exists as a module language and as a text encoding of that module content. And it provides, as a module language, a lot of capabilities that are similarly related to the logical ADM and the goals of what we want to use that ADM for. Yang was not originally designed as to separate its functional layers between encoding, syntax, modular semantics, meaning imports and prefixes and things like that, and data modeling keywords. And the next slide shows a picture to hopefully explain relationships that I'm talking about here. But the other thing that Yang does provide is the ability to have extension keywords and the ability to use extension keywords across different modules. So as a rough comparison, I've split out a few different protocols in the columns here and important aspects related to transport at the top all the way down to behavior model in the middle, and then things like file naming and encoding on the bottom. And the point I'm trying to make here is just that the existing uses of Yang are really focused on, obviously, the original netconf and now restconf and coreconf. But the what Yang covers as a syntax and as a modular language is a lot of different aspects: feature control, cross references, revision bookkeeping, the detailed encoding specifications, file naming, how files relate to each other. And that's all really great and wonderful stuff. And what our goal here is to take advantage of all of these things that already exist, already have wonderful tooling, really great user ecosystems, and have been well devised and well-trod territory for how do you manage the life cycle of this kind of definitional model. One other aspect that I think is interesting to point out is that even Yang itself alone doesn't really fully define a data model in the sense that current models used for netconf, restconf, and coreconf require not just Yang as a definitional language, but require the NMDA as a way to interpret the contents of Yang. So that's why I split this line to indicate here that even Yang alone doesn't give you a full interpretation of a data model. You have to have Yang plus currently NMDA to really understand how the thing is meant to operate. So that being said, the ADM Yang that was referred to earlier in this DTNMA architecture is a way of using Yang for its modular syntax to encode an ADM. And the idea here is that an ADM is a Yang module. It's not a Yang module as a way to define a schema for an ADM structure in some other form. The text in the Yang file is the ADM, or is a canonical way to represent the ADM. And the idea of using this is that all of the encoding, naming, cross-module semantics and syntax is directly reused. We're not trying to reinvent these concepts. These are great and wonderful and well understood things. And we are using extension points, extension keywords, to be able to have a Yang module to define these objects that are necessary for the ADM use. And this has some precedence with Yang data in RFC 8040 and the structure in 8791, in that both of these things are also using Yang as a syntax to define an info set model for data that's not intended to be directly part of a conf data store. So the concept here, again, this is not requesting action of NETMOD in any way, but mentioning that this kind of use can occur separately from the existing Yang model ecosystem, in the sense that these are a separate pool of namespace schemes and namespaces. These are not intermixing AMM keywords and Yang data model keywords, and there's no cross referencing and cross-pollination between these ecosystems. And the idea would be that at the end of the day, there would be a separate DTNMA, INA registry group, and internal registry for models that are well-known and from well-known organizations. I see that there's already some queue, so I'm going to just say that the point here is, again, that we want to take advantage of and make use of this really well-developed ecosystem and these set of tools and set of techniques outside of the original domain in which they're intended to be used. So we can go through the queue now, I think.
I think Lou was supposed to be before me, but he put himself after me. So let me, sorry, this is Mahesh. So I know you said that you're not asking, you're essentially telling us what you're trying to do within your working group. But I still feel like, are you suggesting that you're going to develop an entirely new data modeling language separate from Yang in IETF? Is that really what you're suggesting?
Not language, no, but the concept is there is a different domain with different things in that domain, and we want to use Yang as a modular language to define those things. In the same way, going back to the these other existing definitions of Yang data and structure, I don't see this as being much different than those other existing approved uses of Yang as a way of defining things that exist outside of, say, a conf data store.
So I heard the answer as no, but we are. You know that. So I don't think there's a parallel between defining the NMDA and different types of data stores. I don't think that's the same as what you're doing. To me, I'm seeing a fork of the language and very different usage. And, you know, to me, it's almost outside the scope of this working group, what you're trying to do.
Sure.
And having any relation, go ahead.
I think it is outside the scope in the sense that there's nothing necessarily to be done in NETMOD. The question that I would leave in that case is, what alternative do we have? There are plenty of alternatives. The current strategy is take advantage of what we have in Yang, because there's a lot there, and we really want to leverage both the definitions and the tools. It's also a lot about tooling.
So thanks for sort of presenting here, because that's good to sync up this. And I reviewed the DTA MA doc at the time, the architecture, and I had concerns about what you were doing at that point. This gives me more concerns. I think if you look at the RC 7950, it's quite explicit about what's the scope of extensions, what they can be and can't be. And they're not allowed to change the meaning of the language. They're allowed to, so a compiler is allowed to entirely ignore any extensions and still have the same semantic meaning as if the extensions weren't there. So I do feel this doesn't really relate to the same way as the SX structure example. I think that's quite different, because that was just sort of extending the Yang language to be more useful in terms of how it's being used to define configuration protocols, for example. So it's for use by netconf and restconf. So it's very much in the same domain. Whereas I think what you've done here is you're saying, well, we're taking some parts of Yang, we're chopping out these bits, we're using extension statements to then morph in other bits to it. And I sort of agree with Lou that it feels like it would end up being a fork of the language, and hence I have concerns from that perspective. Is that going to then cause confusion in the industry, that you're going to have two types of files, both called Yang, and they are very, very radically different in terms of how they're defined, how they're used, all the semantics, things like that. So I think we need to be really careful before we go down that route.
I absolutely agree, and I do want to say the kind of feedback that would be really valuable here is to say what disambiguating things would be helpful, in the sense of, do we register a different IANA media type? Do we register a different file extension? What things would make life more straightforward for people interpreting these? Because at the end of the day,
speaking as chair, what would be most helpful is to understand what you can't do in the current language. What are you actually, what problems you're trying to solve that you can't solve with the current solution? And if we end up with a long list of things you can't solve, what you should do is not Yang. At least that's my opinion as chair of this working group. I don't understand if you can't.
The original, I'll say the original goal here is to use SMI with, or ASN1 with modern syntax. And what is Yang but ASN1 with modern syntax?
And just can make the come back. So Lou made a comment that says that this is sort of out of scope for NETMOD, and I sort of feel, in terms of you're saying you don't necessarily want to do that work here, but I think this work we care about whether a fork of Yang is created within the IETF space.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, we care very much about that.
Hey, Ed Bahrain, DTN Working Group Chair. So we presented this material sort of once before in NETMOD at a prior IETF, and we'd had sort of many discussions and requests for helping us understand how to model some of the things we were trying to do in Yang. So I just wanted you to be aware that there have over the years been attempts for us to find the correct and overlapping ways to get things done. Having said that, there is no intent in the DTN working group to create anything that would look like a fork of Yang as a language, or to create things that are confusing. So one of the reasons we wanted to present here was to find out where there could be concerns, when those concerns might elevate to the point of changing direction, and if there's a way of better representing the things that need to be done in Yang to request help in getting that kind of review. So this sounds like the beginning of a good set of conversations, and we would ask that we are able to continue having those conversations. Thank you.
Can we take it to the list?
Just since this is working group, I think it is a beginning of a conversation. And I think the next thing that would be helpful for the conversation is to understand what problems you are trying to solve that you believe are not solved by what this working group has produced.
Yeah. And we have an awful lot written down there. So if someone is willing to read what we have, we would be happy to work with them on that.
Last comment.
Okay, so Yang is a structured language, but the author is saying, I don't want to use that structure, but I want to have the name of the language. So it means, hey, I'm trying to get other people to contribute to what I need just by using the same name, but not using everything else what that language is providing. And in this case, I fully agree with Lou saying, hey, if you have a long list of things that we cannot solve, just create a new, language.
My
So
only
Ed,
response to that,
if you or Brian can send to the NETMOD working group list, the list of issues that you have, not the list of solutions, the list of issues.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we are over. Thank you, everyone, for coming and participating in the conversation. Look forward to seeing you in Madrid and on the list between.